The Far Quest, The Chronicles of Cursoon, Book 1, by R. Jason Lynch. Chapter 32. The Forest Children. Despite all his effort, Cursoon's stunned question still came out much ruder than he intended, but it did not seem to bother the strange little boy in the least.
Pine calls us forest children, but I like what you named us best.
The child answered the bard and then offered a shy smile as his eyes shifted to a bluish green. Still bewildered by the boy, Cursoon frowned with baffled confusion.
What I called you?
He echoed in a questioning tone.
Yeah.
The child answered with a grin, but then his eyes shifted to an indigo hue.
Don't you remember? You called us llElevenLabs after seeing our footprints on the shore.
The bard's mouth dropped open as realization sprang upon his bearded face.
Oh,
He gasped.
but I...
Cursoon started to explain the misunderstanding, but then caught himself. After all, the child clearly liked the name, and there did not seem to be any harm in letting it stay. Thus, the bard decided to leave well enough alone, and for this reason, the forest children were also known as llElevenLabs from that day forward.
Right.
The bard nodded and scratched his beard.
Well, he's definitely no goblin.
He thought with a chuckle, and then reassured himself by remembering.
Tippleglee said they weren't dangerous.
The strange little boy took a step closer.
Pine's calling to you. Want to go see her now?
The llEleven inquired, while his eyes shifted to a bright yellow again.
Who's Pine?
Cursoon asked absent-mindedly, while still coming to terms with this strange child. Again, the llEleven's eyes changed to bluish-green.
She's the lady of this forest, and she wants to meet with you.
Why with me?
The bard asked uneasily, while looking past the boy to his clothes.
Because we told her about you and your splendid swords.
The llEleven explained enthusiastically, while his eyes returned to a bright yellow hue.
Can we go now?
He pressed cheerfully.
I can't very well go like this.
The bard replied while gesturing to himself and laughing uncomfortably. The boy tilted his head in a way that communicated his sudden confusion as his large eyes shifted to indigo. However, he quickly realized what the bard was referring to.
Oh, you mean without your clothes?
The llEleven giggled as his eyes became yellowish-green.
Yeah, that might be slightly awkward.
The boy hurried over, gathered what was an armload of clothes to his small limbs, and hastily carried them to Cursoon.
Now, can we go?
The llEleven asked with eyes that quickly shifted to orange.
Hold on. You have to let me get dressed.
The bard grumbled with a chuckle.
Remember the turtle.
In some ways, this strange child reminded him of his sons, and so he unwittingly said a thing he often told his boys.
Which turtle?
The llEleven asked with a questioning smile and bright yellow eyes that searched around for the shelled creature.
I didn't mean any particular turtle. It's just a figure of speech.
Cursoon stammered with an unsure laugh. The boy started to open his mouth to ask more, but before he could, the bard added,
Do you mind turning around?
The llEleven looked confused and his eyes remained bluish-purple, but after a shrug, he did as Cursoon asked.
Where is this Pine, anyway?
The bard inquired while hurriedly pulling on his clothes. The fact that he was wet and they were dry made the task all the more difficult.
She's away there on the island of the eldest tree.
The llEleven pointed with his tiny hand without looking back at Cursoon. However, before the bard was fully dressed, the boy noticed Tippleglee's leaf-shaped boat. Turning, he ran to it with excited yellow eyes. Climbing aboard, he cried with delight,
Can we ride to the island in this?
Cursoon quickly made last-minute adjustments to his tunic and then shrugged.
I suppose we can, but what about Dapple?
Oh,
The boy responded with an outburst of glee as he sat down in the forward of the vessel.
that's a great idea. I'm sure he'd love to ride with us, too.
The bard looked confused.
I don't think your pony will fit in this little boat, no matter how small he is.
He explained as he walked over to the vessel and took his seat in its stern. The noblin erupted into laughter.
Dapple isn't a pony!
He cried in the midst of his merriment while his eyes shone yellowish green. Then, when he was finally able to quiet himself, the boy called out to his friend.
Dapple, do you want to ride with us?
Immediately, a large otter splashed up onto the shore and scrambled into the small boat, splattering water all over the bard as he passed across his lap on his way to the bow. When he came to where the boy sat, he jostled about with such excitement that he rocked the vessel considerably. There was little doubt that the creature got his name from the patch of white dappling upon his furry chest.
He does want to ride.
The noblin confirmed with bright yellow eyes and a wide smile. Cursoon shook his head and then added with a baffled chuckle,
All right then, I guess we'll be off.
Once he was pulling his paddle through the water with deep strokes, he asked,
Now, which island did you say we're going to?
See the one with the huge pine tree on its crown? That's Our Lady's home.
The noblin answered while pointing out the place with his tiny forefinger. As Cursoon steered the boat toward the isle, he abruptly realized that he had not learned his new friend's name nor given his own.
We've not been properly introduced.
The bard started.
I'm Cure.
Cure soon!
The noblin interrupted with a smile. His eyes remained colored with an excited golden hue as he spoke.
We've been watching you and Mr. Tippleglee ever since you entered our forest.
The bard grinned at the little fellow's frankness.
Was that you I saw in the tree above me?
I can't know for sure. There were many of us there that night. We came when we heard Mr. Tippleglee's music. It echoed so delightfully across our lake. At any rate...
The noblin paused, sprang up onto his seat, turned to face Cursoon, and gave a low bow.
My name is Fane Forest Child.
Unlike the otter, when the noblin hopped up, it scarcely rocked the small boat. Cursoon made one last long stroke with his paddle, then moved to the other side to row there for a while.
Well, it's nice to meet you, Fane Forest Child of Meyermerk.
The noblin's eyes darkened to indigo.
That's not the right name for this wood. At first it was called Alluvion because the river made many islands, but later, when the Lord came and built his castle, he called it Cloverdale because of all the lovely clover.
Ah yes, I know that second name.
Cursoon replied with a smile.
I read it in the steward's book, but I think this place should be called Lakewood.
That's a great name.
Fane cheered with yellow eyes, but then he added, as they shifted to blue,
You're good at naming things.
Just then, the nose of their small boat bumped into the shore of the eldest tree's island. Immediately, the noblin and his otter friend hopped ashore and hurried into the thicket of trees that crowded the isle. Cursoon hauled the vessel onto the shore and then turned to find that he was all alone. However, the bard could still hear the beautiful wordless song, and so he slowly followed the lovely sound until he came to a small clearing on the brow of the hill. In the middle of this open area there stood a gigantic old pine with a large hole in its colossal trunk. The wide opening was obviously not made by hands, but rather it seemed to have happened naturally, and it was so big that Cursoon would only have to stoop slightly to go inside. The ancient tree had shed countless needles over its many years, and these lay all around within the clearing, like a soft carpet. As the bard stepped onto this natural rug, its needles sent forth a sweet perfume that filled the air. As he listened, Cursoon was surprised to find that the beautiful singing came echoing out from deep within the tree, and for this reason the bard stood gazing dumbly into the dark hole. Then the song abruptly fell silent, and the small wood became deathly quiet. The only sound was the mournful sigh of a breeze passing through the branches of the ancient pine. This hushed stillness began to make Kyor-Soon feel uneasy.
Surely this forest child wouldn't lure me into some kind of horrific trap.
The bard reasoned in a grumble under his breath.
He seemed far too innocent for any such deceit.
After Kyor-Soon had waited nervously for several minutes, Fane suddenly stepped into the clearing and smiled. His eyes glowed with a bright golden hue as he offered a coaxing gesture to someone who still lingered within the shelter of the surrounding trees. In answer, a throng of little children burst out from the underbrush and joined him. The crowd was made up of not only boys, but girls also. Unlike the boys, they wore little green dresses that came down past their knees, but they all went about upon bare feet. These forest children varied in appearance. While they were all near to the same age, some were very fair, some were reddish-brown like tippleglee, and others were darker still. However, they all had ever-changing eyes. More than a few of the noblins wore their hair short or pulled back so that their ears were uncovered, and thus the bard saw, for the first time, that these little ones had pointed ears like tippleglee. Gathering around Kyor-Soon, the odd children took his hands and guided him down to sit in the pine needles. Then, some of the boys took off his colorful bard's hat and tried it on, passing it around with glowing yellow eyes and bright, happy smiles. At the same time, many of the girls came forward, and with delighted giggles, they playfully braided Kyor-Soon's long hair. Being both a father and a bard, Kyor-Soon felt at home around children, and so this whole affair actually eased all his misgivings, for these noblins were the truest children he had ever met.